Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your infinite wisdom and providential goodness has appointed the offices of rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of humankind, we beseech you to behold with your abundant favor us, your servants, whom we have been pleased to call to the performance of such important trust in this land. Let your blessing descend upon us here in Parliament assembled, and grant that we may, as in your presence, treat and consider all matters that shall come under our deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the good of those whose interests we have committed to our charge. All which we ask in the name and for the sake of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. Are there any notices of motions? I recognize the Government Chief Whip.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that orders number 1 to 44 be stood over until order number 45 has been disposed of.
Who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. The clerk will read the 45th order of the day.
Urgent debate on motion on the need to recognize domestic and unpaid care work in Zimbabwe as a vital part of national development.
Thank you. When this debate was adjourned on the 2nd of June 2026, the question before the House was a motion by Honorable Osibana, as set forth on page 2290 of today's order paper. Is there any further debate? I recognize Honorable T. Pinduka.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am, and good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am, for the opportunity to contribute on this very important motion. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I rise to support the motion on domestic care work and unpaid care work in Zimbabwe. Madam Speaker, ma'am, looking at the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals at a macro level, the SDGs 5.4 calls for the recognition of unpaid care work, so that the domestic and unpaid care work can also, the people and supporting the domestic care work can also realize value out of such a service. Madam Speaker, ma'am, in recognizing the domestic care work and unpaid care work in Zimbabwe, unpaid care work keeps the economy running. If Zimbabweans has to pay for the child care and elder care, that is include cooking, cleaning, and support for those in our homes, mostly in rural communities. Madam Speaker, ma'am, you will see that even our gross domestic product will also rise through such recognition. Madam Speaker, ma'am, from the women and girls are the hardest hit by the domestic care work, and domestic care work and unpaid care work in most rural communities. But however, I would also like to applaud the trust by His Excellency the President, Dr. Emerson Damudzo Mnangagwa, the trust to provide sources of water through the village business units established in all villages, 35,000 villages in Zimbabwe. As a result, this will also cushion and lessen the burden of women mostly and girls across the rural communities. And this is also a positive impact in making sure that domestic and unpaid care work is also recognized in Zimbabwe. Madam Speaker, ma'am, from the public service and infrastructure perspective, you also notice that countries like Ghana and Ethiopia have invested muchly in water provision closer to people, which also resonates with what is currently happening in our communities through the presidential borehole drilling scheme. And this will go a long way in also supporting women and girls who are also mostly engaged in domestic care work, domestic and unpaid care work. Comparing also, Madam Speaker, ma'am, with South Africa, South Africa is a national policy framework. Uruguay has also passed a national care system which, with public child care and elder care being recognized nationally. So in Zimbabwe, I would also suggest that it is high time that we also consider the legislation and also come up with a framework that also recognizes the domestic work and unpaid care work that is happening in our country, Zimbabwe. On that same framework, Madam Speaker, ma'am, this will also call for the reduction in terms of or for the provision of other services to women and girls who are also taking part in this domestic care work and unpaid care work, in making sure that they do have other opportunities to do like engaging in other learning activities so that they can also earn other skills in place of domestic and unpaid care work. This will also call for the public service and social welfare ministry to also increase its also engage into a survey that also informs even the Treasury, the Ministry of Finance and Economic Development, to make sure that in terms of budget allocations, the ministry also gets much of its support through the Treasury releases, so that most of unpaid care work and domestic care work is also recognized in Zimbabwe. This will go a long way, Madam Speaker, as we are aware that as we move towards the Vision 2030 through the National Development Strategy 2, in the spirit of leaving no one and no place behind, the domestic care work and the domestic work and unpaid care work, it's a reality in our communities, and it's high time that we, as a country, move forward and recognize, of course, through scientific data and research. I think this will also assist in making sure that we do have a statistic and science-based approach and framework towards recognizing the domestic work and unpaid care work in Zimbabwe. With that contribution, I so submit, Madam Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Pinduka. Next to take the floor is Honorable S. Dube.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Good afternoon.
I would like to thank you for affording me the opportunity to aid my voice. Honorable Speaker, ma'am, unpaid care and domestic work is pivotal to national development. The future of every nation is shaped by how well it cares for its children today. The first 5 years of child's life are critical for brain development, health, emotional well-being, and future learning. Children who receive quality early care are more likely to succeed in school, develop stronger cognitive and social skills, and become productive citizens who contribute meaningful to national development. Madam Speaker, ma'am, yet many Zimbabwean families struggle to provide adequate care because caregivers, particularly women, receive little support, while access to affordable child care and early childhood development services remains limited. This care deficit not only affects parents' ability to participate in the economy, but also compromises children's long-term educational and developmental outcomes. A national care policy and legislation would address this challenge by calling for increased investment in early childhood development centers, expanding affordable child care services, supporting parents through family-friendly policies, and promoting community-based care systems. These investments would ensure that every Zimbabwean child has the opportunity to reach their full potential, regardless of their family's income or circumstances. Madam Speaker, ma'am, South Korea provides a compelling example. Over the past 2 decades, the government of South Korea has made substantial public investment in early childhood development and care by expanding subsidized child care, increasing access to equality preschool education, and strengthening parental support programs. As a result, enrollment in early childhood education has risen significantly, and research by the OECD shows that children who attend high-quality early childhood education and care perform better academically, develop stronger social and cognitive skills, and enjoy better long-term educational outcomes than those who do not. South Korea's experiences demonstrate the investing in care is not just a social welfare intervention, but that it is a strategic investment in building a more skilled, productive, and competitive future workforce. For Zimbabwe, investing in care is better, therefore not an expense, but an investment with lasting terms. Every dollar invested in supporting caregivers and providing quality early childhood services strengthens human capital, improves educational achievements, reduces future social costs, and builds a healthier and more productive generation. Madam Speaker, ma'am, let me conclude by stating that investing in care today is investing in the next generations of Zimbabweans. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Dube. Next to take the floor is Honorable Pijo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. I thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am, for this opportunity you have given me to also give what I think about the motion tabled by Honorable Spanda on the need for Zimbabwe to adopt the unpaid care and domestic work policy and legislation. Madam Speaker, ma'am, let me start by stating that unpaid care and domestic work, acronym UCDW, encompasses the wide range of activities performed within the household and community, including child care, care of the sick, care of the elderly, cooking, cleaning, and the collection of wood and water for cooking, for which no monetary compensation is received. Despite its critical role in sustaining human life and underpinning economic activity, unpaid care work remains largely invisible in national accounts, policy frameworks, and development planning. Globally, women perform approximately 3/4 of all unpaid care work. This disproportionate burden constrains women's access to education, paid employment, and civic participation, perpetuating gender inequality across generations. The International Labour Organization, ILO, estimates that globally 700 million women are outside the labor market, primarily because of care responsibilities. In Africa, the challenge is even more pronounced, with women spending an average of 3.5 times more hours on unpaid care work than men. Before I proceed, Madam Speaker, ma'am, allow me to commend the Minister of Finance and Investment Promotion and Zimsters for successfully undertaking the time use survey as promised during the 2025 pre-budget seminar, when I called on the government to conduct this survey so that we know how much this sector contributed to our national accounts. While I understand that work is underway to establish the role of unpaid care work in national development, I am pleased that we now have the time use survey, which provides the most comprehensive evidence to date on how Zimbabwean women and men allocate their time. Indeed, the data from Zimbabwe 2025 Time Use Survey, TUS, confirm deep structural gender imbalances that necessitate urgent policy responses aligned with international and regional frameworks. Therefore, I'm here today to support Honorable Sibanda's motion by situating Zimbabweans' unpaid care work landscape within the ILO's global normative framework, examining the regional status across Africa, and drawing on the Zimstad's time use survey statistics to characterize Zimbabwe's national profile. Let me hasten to mention that the international response to the challenge of unpaid care and domestic waste is anchored in a cluster of ILO conventions, recommendations, and analytical frameworks that together establish the global standard of care. The ILO 5R framework for decent work are: number 1, recognize; number 2, reduce; number 3, redistribute; number 4, reward. Let me explain this in detail. Recognize, that is to acknowledge the economic and social value of unpaid care work through national accounts, satellite accounting, time use surveys, and policy visibility. Reduce, that is to decrease the total burden of unpaid care work through investment in care supporting infrastructure, clean water, energy access, child care facilities, and time-saving technologies. Number 3, redistribute. Shift this disproportionate share of unpaid care work from women to men and from households to the state and private sector through paternity, parental leave, community care services, and social protection. Reward, ensure decent wages, social protection, and safe working conditions for paid care workers, the majority of whom are women. And the last one, that is the 5th one, represent. That means to guarantee the voice of care workers, unpaid carers, and care recipients in social dialogue, collective bargaining, and police processes. SDG target 5.4 operationalizes the recognition pillar at global scale, calling on member states to recognize and value unpaid and domestic work through the provision of public services, infrastructure, and social protection policies, and promotion of shared responsibility within the household and the family. Progress on this target is monitored through the indicator 5.4 section 1. The proportion of time spent on unpaid domestic and care work by sex, precisely the data that Zimstad's 2025, that is TSU, generates. The ILO estimates that every day more than 16 million hours are devoted to unpaid domestic and care work around the world. When monetized at minimum wage rates, this amounts to approximately 11 trillion USD dollars annually, a subsidy to the global economy that is borne predominantly by women and girls. Among women of reproductive age 25 to 54 years, 2/3 of those outside the labor market globally cite care responsibility as the primary barrier. representing 379 million women. Africa presents a distinctive unpaid care work context shaped by the structural poverty, limited public service provision, high informality, climate vulnerability, and deeply embedded patriarchal social norms. These factors combine to make the care burden particularly heavy and unequal distributed. Across all African countries, women spend significantly more time on the unpaid care work than men. On average, African women spend 3.5 times more time on unpaid care and domestic work than men, limiting their engagement in education, income generation, and community leadership. This time poverty, in quotes, the lack of this discretional time to pursue paid work, rest, or civic activity represents a structural constraint on women's economic empowerment across the continent. In sub-Saharan Africa, specifically, the care workforce is characterized by very small formally paid care sectors, widespread informality, low wages, and unsafe working conditions. Gender stereotypes that naturalize women's affinity for care work entrench these dynamics, making it difficult for policy to disrupt established patterns of labor allocation within households. Therefore, the use of time use surveys remain underutilized across Africa. Only a minority of African countries have conducted national representative TSU, and even fewer have conducted them after 2010. Zimbabwe's 2025 time use survey is therefore a significant continentally contribution to the evidence base, positioning the country to monitor SDG 5.4 Section 1 and to inform African Union reporting on Agenda 2063 gender targets. Zimbabwe 2025 time use survey provides the most rigorous national representative data set on time allocation to date, conducted in accordance with ICATA's ICAT-US 2016 and utilizing a 24-hour recall method beginning at 4 a.m. The survey classified activities across to 5 dimensions: contracted work, employment and learning, that is committed work, unpaid domestic services and caregiving, free time necessary activities, and simultaneous activities. Key findings reveal deep and persistent gender inequalities. 5.9 hours females daily work, committed work, versus 3.8 hours for males. These are the findings. 228% gender gap, ages 25 to 34. Women spend 3.28 times more time than men. 89.9% female unpaid domestic participation, largest female activity rate after self-care. Meaning, on average, females spend 1.5 times more than males in committed work, that is domestic and unpaid care work. 5.9 hours against 3.8 hours per day, according to these results. The proportion of time spent by males on contracted work, employment, learning, and on-use production was double that of females, minus 17.5% versus 17.5%, versus 8.7%, revealing the classic double burden dynamic in which women juggle care obligations alongside labor market participation. The gender gap in unpaid work was most acute among the 25 to 34 age group, the prime childbearing and working years, where the gap peaked at 228%. This means that women in this group spend 228% more time than men on domestic work, unpaid care work, and volunteer work combined. Put differently, if men spend 1 hour on unpaid care work, Women in this age group will spend 3.28 hours on the same activity. The gap diminished but did not disappear with age, reaching its lowest level of 76.9% among those aged 65 and above. I will conclude by highlighting a few case studies from within African countries that have made measurable advances in adopting the unpaid care work policy agenda, offering lessons and models that Zimbabwe can adapt to its own context. Rwanda case study. Landmark legal reform and time-saving infrastructure 2021 to 2025. Rwanda has implemented one of Africa's most comprehensive and legally grounded responses to unpaid care work. In July 2024, Rwanda revised its law governing persons and family to explicitly recognize unpaid care work in marital property, valuing it at 10 to 39% of jointly acquired assets. This landmark provision was informed directly by United Nations Women National Baseline Survey, which measured that women spend 3.7 hours per day on unpaid care, more than triple the time of men. At community level, over 1,100 energy-efficient cook stoves and 92 rainwater tanks have been deployed across communities, cutting cooking and water collection time. A 2025 impact study found that women use the saved hours to engage in farming, run small businesses, and attend skills training. The other case study from Tanzania, National Policy Commitment and Clean Cooking Technology, 2021 to 2024. In 2021, the government of Tanzania made a formal pledge to reduce women's unpaid care work, expand social services, and create decent care jobs. This commitment was institutionalized in the National Gender and Women Development Policy 2023, which prioritizes shared responsibility for care as a core policy objective. The National Clean Cooking Strategy sets a target of 80% of households using clean water solutions by 2034, directly addressing one of the most time-intensive care burdens. Implementation has been rapid across Siginda, Dodoma, and Zanzibar. More than 400 clean cooking and solar technologies were distributed, reducing cooking time by up to 3 hours per day and cutting weekly firewood collection. Tanzania's case illustrates how national-level political will, backed by sector policies and concrete infrastructure interventions, can accelerate the reduction of women's domestic burden at scale. Therefore, drawing on the global framework regional context, Zimbabweans TSU evidence and African case study lessons, the following priority actions are identified for Zimbabwe. 1. There is urgent need to develop a national unpaid care and domestic work policy grounded in the ILO 5R framework with clear targets for reducing the gender gap in unpaid care hours, as evidenced by the TSU benchmark of females spending 5.9 hours against males 3.8 hours in committed work daily. 2. Incorporate unpaid care work metrics into Zimbabwe's national gender monitoring systems and close the data gap that has historically limited accountability. 3. Invest in care supporting infrastructure such as clean cooking technologies, water access, child facilities, and care facilities for older persons. Next, integrate care responsive budgeting into national and sub-national planning, ensuring that fiscal allocations to health, education, and social protection explicitly account for unpaid care work reduction objectives. Partner with the private sector to expand workplace child care and flexible work arrangements and reducing burden the double burden documented for employed women in the TSU. I thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Pijo. Next Honorable Member to take the floor is Honorable G. Matara.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker, it's T, not D. Okay, thank you for the opportunity you have given me to contribute to this important debate on unpaid care. I support this motion because meaningful women's leadership cannot be achieved without addressing the unequal burden of unpaid care in domestic work. Madam Speaker, ma'am, leadership requires time, flexibility, mobility, and the ability to participate fully in public life. Yet across Zimbabwe, countless capable women are unable to pursue leadership opportunities because they shoulder the primary responsibility for caring for children, older persons, people with disabilities, and sick family members, while also undertaking household chores such as cooking, cleaning, and collecting water and firewood. As alluded to earlier by the previous speaker, Madam Speaker, the Zimbabwe National Time Use Survey of 2025 shows that women spend substantially more time than men on unpaid care and domestic work. These responsibilities limit women's ability to attend political meetings, participate in community development structures, contest elections, serve on public boards, or assume leadership positions in both the public and private sectors. As a result, women's underrepresentation in decision-making is not simply a matter of individual choice, but a result of the consequences of structural inequalities that continue to confine women to unpaid caregiving roles. Madam Speaker, ma'am, Zimbabwe has made important commitments to advance women's participation in leadership. Section 17 of the Constitution obliges the state to promote gender balance at all levels of society, while Section 8 guarantees women equal opportunities in the political, economic, and social spheres. Furthermore, Zimbabwe is a state party to the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and the Protocol to the African Charter on Human and People's Rights on the Rights of Women in Africa. Collectively, these instruments recognize that structural barriers, including the unequal distribution of unpaid care work, must be addressed if women are to participate equally in public and political life. If we are truly committed to increasing women's representation in leadership and decision-making, we must also remove the barriers that prevent them from participating in line with these regional and international commitments to which we are a party. Reducing unpaid care in domestic work is not only a social policy, but also a democratic imperative that will strengthen inclusive governance and accelerate national development. Madam Speaker, ma'am, investing in care is an investment in leadership. A comprehensive national policy and legislative framework on unpaid care and domestic work would promote affordable child care, strengthen social protection, improve access to water, sanitation, and other public services, and encourage the equitable sharing of care responsibilities between women and men. These measures would free women's time, expand their opportunities to engage in public affairs, and enable more women to assume leadership positions in parliament, local authorities, public institutions, business, and civil societies. I therefore urge this House to support the adoption of a comprehensive national policy and legislative framework on unpaid care and domestic work, a necessary step towards achieving equal leadership opportunities for women in Zimbabwe. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Matara. Honorable Kaitano.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, ma'am. I reckon that the motion before this House today is a motion that needs closer scrutiny for both sides of the coin. Indeed, Madam Speaker, ma'am, there is a lot of unpaid work, especially for those people that care for others, especially for those people that do certain daily household work, but by the end of the day, they are not paid for it. If they were paid, Madam Speaker, ma'am, their incomes would be added into the GDP that we were talking about last Tuesday. They will be part of the GDP figures. They will be part of the per capita income. But a lot of it goes unpaid. At home, I've got my sister. She does lots of work, but it's not paid. The work that she does at home has a potential to be paid if she were to do it somewhere else, at a company. She would have been paid lots of money for that. And the best thing about such kind of work, they are not specialized in one area. One moment they are cleaning, another moment they are cooking, this other moment they are doing laundry, this other time they are doing gardening. I think it is my view, Madam Speaker, ma'am, that that kind of work must be recognized by the government. And those people either must be paid or should be compensated in some way, because it's real work. It's done at home, but copy from home and paste them at a company. At home, zero salary. At a workplace, 500 USD per month. So there is need to recognize this work. Also, Madam Speaker, ma'am, paying caregivers for this unpaid work can protect those that receive the services. It could be, for example, the elderly. In our culture, Madam Speaker, ma'am, I'm Shona, and I'm from Mudzi. I'm a Ngawe person. I've had so many instances where the father-in-law is sick at the village. They are taken here to Harare for caregiving by their daughter-in-law, and probably 3-4 months, 6 months, the daughter-in-law is taking care of their father-in-law. And in our culture, I hear people saying, allow me to put in Shona, Murora ngapi we mombe akachengeta ate rara. In itself, it's a recognition that the work that the Murora did deserves to be paid. But you know, in our culture, you are given a mombe as a token. It's simply, if it were in the commercial world, they could be paid hundreds of thousands of USD. But in our culture, they're just given a token as recognizing. So in our culture, in some instances, caregiving is recognized. So this debate of this motion seeks to have this kind of work recognized at government level, at national level, across all traditions and cultures within the boundaries of Zimbabwe. That's what this motion seeks to advance. Madam Speaker, ma'am. Even the quality of care should certainly improve. When somebody is recognized for caregiving that they are doing, they are recognized in some way. Surely, when somebody knows that they are being recognized, Madam Speaker, ma'am, you'll agree with me, when they do their work, they do it excellently. They will do it unreservedly. They will do it with all their might, with all their hearts, with all their intelligence, because they know they are being recognized. They will not feel used. They will not feel it's one of those things that I can do. There's nothing else I can do but do it. So the quality of their work is different from those that feel if I do good, I'm also recognized in a handsome way. So that's one advantage. So if that is recognized, caregiving will surely, the quality of caregiving will surely improve. But the conundrum or the predicament that I face as I think through my debate, what I've just said, I am thinking of the cost on government. How big is such a cost going to be? I shudder to think the amounts of incentives, the quantum of the compensation, how it will sit on the fiscus. I'm also in a kind of a difficult situation, Madam Speaker, ma'am, to also think deeply as to how then do we identify these caregivers and not abuse the program. I'm also in a difficult position, Madam Speaker, ma'am, as to the kind of compensation that must be given, let alone the quantum thereof. I think these questions, as a house, we need to deeply look into these before we adopt the motion. We certainly need to dig deeper and see what is feasible. Yes, we may come up with something that is workable. Will this not promote gender stereotypes, given that the report that I'm getting is that what one time men does, women are doing 3.28 times. Are we not going to then conclude that some work of caregiving belongs to women? Those are questions that I'm putting across in the House so that we can closely look at it and come out with a feasible, with a workable solution as to how do we balance the need. And I've motivated for that. My sister at home, Brenda, does things, but she's not paid. If she were at work, she could have been, having lots of money. Is it fair not to pay her? Not at all. It's not fair. She has to be paid. So there's a strong argument for the unpaid work to be paid. But how many Brendas do we have? How do we identify them? How do we identify the quantum? What kind of compensation should they be paid? I think is one of the questions that we need to look at as a House. But by and large, I support the motion, and we need deeper and detailed scrutiny and analysis of it. I therefore submit, Madam Speaker, ma'am, that we need to look at this motion, but with a lot of great wisdom in how best we can move forward. I thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Kaitano. Honorable Murobezi.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to add my voice to this debate. Madam Speaker, I rise this afternoon to support the motion tabled by Honorable Sibanda and seconded by Honorable Joe, which calls for the recognition, valuation, and policy intervention on unpaid care and domestic work in Zimbabwe. Madam Speaker, unpaid care is the invisible backbone of our nation. It is the work that makes all other work possible, yet it remains unrecognized, it remains unrewarded, and it remains unprotected. Madam Speaker, unpaid care and domestic work is the invisible backbone of our society. It sustains households, it nurtures children, and it supports the elderly, and it ensures the daily functioning of our communities. Yet, because it is unpaid, Madam Speaker, it is often dismissed as women's work and excluded from economic planning. This invisibility, Madam Speaker, perpetuates gender inequality and undermines our national development agenda. Across Zimbabwe, Madam Speaker, women and girls shoulder the burden of unpaid domestic care work in cooking, in cleaning, in fetching water, sometimes from distances that are very far away from households, caring for children, the elderly, and the sick. This labor, Madam Speaker, sustains households and communities, yet it is treated as if it has no economic value. The result, Madam Speaker, is gender inequality. Women are deprived time to learn, women are deprived time to earn, women are deprived time to lead, while girls are pulled out of school to shoulder domestic burdens. Madam Speaker, evidence shows that women and girls are disproportionately shoulder this responsibility. Like I've highlighted before, they spend long hours cooking, cleaning, fetching water, caring for children, tending to the sick, tasks essential to human survival but unrecognized in our GDP. This burden, Madam Speaker, deprives them of opportunities. It is not only a question of fairness, Madam Speaker, but of justice and equality. Madam Speaker, at its core, this motion is about justice. Unpaid care work is not simply a household duty. It is a structural issue that perpetuates inequality. When women and girls are forced to sacrifice education, income, and leadership opportunities to shoulder invisible labor, society denies them equal citizenship. Social justice, Madam Speaker, demands that we recognize this imbalance and correct it. To value unpaid care is to affirm that every citizen's contribution matters, whether it is counted in wages or in hours of care. By legislating recognition and allocating resources, we move from rhetoric to fairness, ensuring that the burdens of care are shared, the dignity of caregivers is upheld, and the promise of equality is made real. Madam Speaker, beyond the social justice imperative, there is also an economic justice dimension. Unpaid care work is a hidden subsidy to the economy. When women spend hours fetching water, tending to the sick, or caring for children, they are performing labor that the state would otherwise have to provide through hospitals, through schools, through social services. Yet this contribution is invisible in our gross domestic product and absent from our budgets. By failing to recognize it, Madam Speaker, we undervalue the very labor that sustains our workforce and stabilizes our communities. Madam Speaker, ma'am, investment in infrastructure such as clean water systems, renewable energy, and child care centers is not simply development, it is a redistribution of care responsibilities. It is an acknowledgement that women's time is valuable, that girls deserve classrooms instead of kitchens, and that our economy must be built on fairness as well as growth. Madam Speaker, the United Nations estimates that if unpaid care work were monetized, it could contribute between 10 to 39% of GDP. In some countries, in South Africa, unpaid care has been integrated into national statistics, shaping social protection policies, as we have heard from Honorable Joe. This House, Madam Speaker, must therefore call upon the Ministry of Public Service and Labour and Social Welfare to develop a comprehensive policy and legislation on unpaid domestic care work, and to commission a national survey to quantify its contribution to GDP. Furthermore, the Ministry of Finance and Investment Promotion must also prioritize and increase budget allocations for social protection programs, infrastructure development, and social services. Recognition of unpaid work is not charity, Madam Speaker, it is justice. Girls and women burdened with household chores drop out of school, perpetuating the vicious cycles of poverty. The Beijing Platform for Action and Sustainable Development Goal 5 explicitly call for valuing all unpaid care work. Madam Speaker, some may want to argue that the nation cannot afford to pay for unpaid care work. I would like to submit before this House that we already pay the price in lost productivity, in poor health outcomes, and in entrenched inequality. Recognition is an investment, Madam Speaker, not a cost. Others may want to say that care is a private family duty. Yet, Madam Speaker, families are the foundation of the nation. If the state values soldiers for defending borders, it must also give caregivers for defending life itself. Madam Speaker, failure to recognize unpaid care work deepens poverty and inequality. Women who spend hours on unpaid labor have less time for income-generating activities, education, or civic participation. This perpetuates cycles of dependency and marginalization. Conversely, investing in social services such as child care centers and energy infrastructure reduces the burden and frees women to participate fully in the economy. Madam Speaker, in conclusion, actually I just want to jump onto the moral imperative before I conclude. Madam Speaker, this is not merely an economic issue, it is a moral one. We cannot continue to build our nation on the backs of women and girls whose labor is unrecognized, unrewarded, and uncompensated. Justice demands that we acknowledge their contribution and create systems that allow them to rest, to thrive, and to share equally the fruits of development. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, I therefore urge this House to adopt the motion and commit to a Zimbabwe where unpaid care and domestic work is recognized as a pillar of national development. By doing so, Madam Speaker, we will advance gender equality, we will strengthen our economy, and we will honor the dignity of every citizen who labors, whether paid or unpaid. I humbly submit.
Thank you, Honorable Murombedzi. Honorable Barbara Thompson.
Maita basa mubati wechigaro. Maita basa mubati wechigaro nemukana wamandipa wekuisawo pfungwa dzangu munhau iri mudariro. Mubati wechigaro, mabasa epamusha ndo anosanganisira kuchera mvura, kutsvaga huni, kuchengeta vana, kuchengeta vakwegura nevarwere nehama dzinorarama nehurema. Mabasa aya anoita kuti pamusha pagarike nekuraramika zvakanaka, paine utsanana, vanhu vachipfeka, kudya zviri nyore nekuda kwevabatsiri ava. Takazvitarisa, madzimai nevasikana vanoshanda maawa angaita masere kana kusvika 10 vachimhanya-mhanya, vangave vana mbuya vanochengeta vazukuru mazuva ose. Zvinooneka sezvinhu zvavanotofanira kuita pasina kubetseredza kana kubhadharwawo. Mwanasikana anotozoshaya mukana wekudzidza kana kuenda kune mamwe mabasa ane muripo, zvinokonzera kuneta neurwere munyama kuburikidza nekubatikana mupfungwa. Pamusha zvinhu zvese tikada kuzvitarisa zvinenge zviri zvababa, izvo zvinozopedzesera zvakonzeresa mhirizhonga, kuurayana kana kuzviuraya. Unotadza kana kuzozvimiririra pachako, unenge usina izwi, usina simba, usina ruzivo, usina kana cheuviri pamusha paunenge uchishanda nguva dzose. Mubati wechigaro, dai Ministry yePublic Service vagadzira mutemo unoona nezvemabasa epamusha asingabhadharwe aya. Ngapave nemutemo unopa zororo kuvanhu ivava, kunyangwe kune vaya vanoshanda mabasa iwayo vachipiwa miripo midiki. Vopiwawo miripo inozivikanwa nehurumende. Ringave zvakare zororo reurwere chairwo, ngavatenderwewo kuzorora. Kusiyiswa basa ngakujekeswe pachiine nguva, miripo yavo ngaijekeswewo zvakare. Mabasa iwaya ngaave nekudzidziswa zvakanyanya, kunyanya kune vaya vanochengeta vana nevanorarama nehurema. Umwe anopedzesera atapurirwa urwere kana kukuvadza wacho waari kuchengeta nekushaya ruzivo. Umwewo anosiyiswa basa asina kana kupiwa muripo kwenguva refu, kana iri hama iri kuchengeta kunyangwe vana anongonzwo ndauya kuzotora mwana wangu, hapapiwawo kana chinoratidza kutenda munhu nebasa raanenge aita. Ngapabuditswe pachena nguva inotenderwa munhu kuti ashande, ive zvakare yakatarwa pamutemo. ngapaiswe mutemo unochengetedza vanhu ava kana vachinge vabatwa zvisina kufanira mumabasa avo. Maita basa mubati wechigaro.
Tinotenda Mazvita. Honorable C. Madzivanyika.
Ndatenda mubati wechigaro nekuda kwemukana wamandipa kuti ndibotaurawo shoma pamusoro penyaya ye-unpaid care and domestic work. Mubati wechigaro patakataudzwa nyaya iyi ichinzi unpaid care and domestic work, ndakangoti vanhu havada kumbodii chaizvo chaizvo, nokuti Mwari wokudenga wakatisika tiri murume nomukadzi. Culture yedu inotaura kuti mudzimai ndiye anoita zvekutsvaira achidina achisuka achiitawo zvimwe, saka chachata chii papo? Hakuti kushaisha upenyu hwedu here? Ndakatoshushikana mazuva okutanga kufunge zvenyu Madam Chair tichinzwa nyaya iyi kuti vanoda kuti kudii vanhu ava, zvinokwadza here kuaina kana kubika kana kudii, chii chinonyanya kunetsa ipapo? Chii chakonza kuti mugoti basa here akonzi unpaid? Ko varume tinoitawo rimwe risiri paid? Ko zvachada papiko nyaya iyi? Asi totera Mwari wokudenga Madam Chair, ndakazopenyerwa. Ndapenyerwa Madam Chair, ndauda kutsanangura manje kuti ndakazopenyerwa sei. Madam Chair, regai ndibotaura ndiboita zvinhu ndibonyatsa kutsanangura mabasa anoitwa nomudzimai kurural setup kumusha. Madam Chair, kumusha kunogona kuva pamusha panogona kuva nevanhu 10 pano mudzimai mumwe chete. Mudzimai mumwe chete anomika shoti vanhu vese vari papo vadya, vanhu vese vari papo vageza. Kana kuri kunotsvaka mvura normally vanotora nguva yakaita 30 minutes kunochera mvura. Mvura inocherwa kumagwizi kure nekwavanogara nzvimbo zhinji Madam Chair. So ndiri kuona kuti mubati wechigaro ka mabasa amadzimai kumusha akati omei. Vanobika nehuni, huni hadzivani kupose pose Madam Chair. Misha yedu mizhinji pane gomo rinenge riri kure, so vada kufamba mutimu yakareba unotsvaka huni, vodzoka vonochera mvura, vodzoka voya vowacha, vosuka maplates, vobika, vomeka shati munhu wese wageza. Saka basa rino Madam Chair rindange nyore tichitaura kudaiwo, asi musi wamunoriponzita kana musi unongobva mudzimai panzvimbo iyoyo ndobva munonzwisa kuti basa iri shuwa iri rakaoma. Madam Chair, kana kuri kumusha unotoona kuti mudzimai ndiyo pila, ndosaka vachiti musha mukadzi kumusha. Vanenge vachitaura izvozvo kuti no, kana munhu hasipo pamba ipapatodzima hapasina chaedza nenhau ye-unpaid care domestic work. Madam Chair, mubati wechigaro ndoda kutaura futi kunyange muurban area madzimai ane machallenges akawanda, basa vanenge akawanda. Vanomwana 4 AM vachimeka sure kuti mvura yadziswa nguva yachano chino, vadzisira mwana umwe neumwe mvura daende kuchikoro. Asi basa riri nyorere Madam Chair, tikada kuzvitarisa tisangasa zvose kubikira vana, kuwachira vana kuaina, kutarisa nguva apedza chikoro zvakanaka here, vaenda vadzoka here, vari raiti iri. Asi basa rakachipa, basa iro ndo riri kunzi unpaid care domestic work. Madam Chair, pandakabva madzimai achiuya nenyaya iyi ndakati saka madzimai pari kuti panzi basa iri rinoda kutiwa tinofanira kuti because motion yehonorable member haisi kuti vanhu vabhadharwe, because tinoona kukundikana senyika kuvabhadhara madzimai aya. Motion yavo da kuti imba inoinzwisise, motion yehonorable member haisi kuti hurumende ngayokaridze mari tibhadhare madzimai ose aya basa rakuchiitira, kwete. Motion iri kuti let us recognize unpaid care domestic work. Recognition pachishona ngatirerekedzei kuisa uremu pabasa ravari kuita. Tikaremekedza basa ravari kuita naye vanozwa kusununguka kurerukirwawo panenge vachiita basa iri. Asi chakakosha ngatite recognize vanhu ava vari kuita basa risiri kubhadharwa. Madam Chair, muZimbabwe muno pamastatistics akatsvakwa neinonzi Zimcode pakabudapo kuti vana vadiki vane makore 0 kutanga pa0 kusvika pa 17 years, vana ivavo vanosvika ivo 7 million muZimbabwe. Asi madzimai ari kuchengeta vana ava vasiri kumabasa vanosvika 1.2 million. Kureva kuti ratio iripo ndeyekuti pane ratio ye 1:6 kuva kuti madzimai ari kuti asiri kumabasa kuchengeta vana ava isi 1:6, 1 per every 6 child. Tisingaverengi vana baba navamwe vakura vanoda kukeya. Madam Chair, mukandasa zvandiri panapa kapa handimbozvigoni kuzvimisikidza izvi kuti ndiro zvandiko zvandiri kuonekera ndizvo zvinoratidza mukadzi ari kumashure kumba uko izvo zvanditori panapa izvozvi. So muchaona kuti yose iyo ikeweki asi vanhu vanotwasa kuti hapana zvikuitika. So ndaona sekuti Madam Chair, regai nditaurewo because ndiri umwe wakapenyerwa. Ndakaona vazhinji vanongoti zvazvine basa reko zvakakatisika zvakadaro ngatingodero handitakadero, asi ndaona sekuti aiwa regai ndise zwi rangu kuti zvibetsere madzimai. So kana taita recognize todini motion yakatitsara vanhu vechirume haisi kuti hurumende itsvaka mari yekubhadhara vanhu because hatizvigoni, asi motion iri kuti how can we reduce dambudziko ratinaro iri reunpaid care and domestic work. Saka pakuretorejisa sei isu policy makers takuita kuti right mudzimai wekumaruwa anosvipika kunochera mvura anoda 30 minutes kunochera mvura nokudzoka. Aiwaka ngatiseka mabhoho padhuze nemadzimai edu basa ravo rerukizvi tatointervina. Ndonyaya yekutsvaka panapa mahonorable members, nyaya iri panapa ndeyekuti tinoita rerukisa madzimai edu aya chinhambo chokuti aende kundofamba 30 minutes kunochera mvura nokudzoka tamisira bhoho padhuze vakubetsereka. So no intervention ikudiwa nemotion ya honorable Sibanda muno muimba ino yeparliament. Kuyamba maurban areas ngatisiro mapipe water tibetsere vanhu vaona mvura yepamatepi zvobetsera madzimai edu. Madam Chair, nenyaya yekumusha yekuti mudzimai anonetseka even nechikafu chavana, tiri kuti nemikana sehurumende yokurejusa unpaid care work burden yavo nokuvagadzirirawo mairrigation areas. Chibetsera kuti vaite irrigate vachiwana source of income vari kumusha ikoko, zvinobetsera kuti care burden yavo idzikisiwe. So ibasa rese hurumende kuona kuti tingabetsera sei madzimai edu aya. Madam Chair, panyaya yehuni madzimai mazhinji kumaruwa anoshandisa huni, toita sei to reduce? Yes, taita recognize right now toita sei kuredusa dambudziko iri, dambudziko rehuni. Haiwashe ngatibetsere kuti isu semaparamende tolobha kuti gas ridzikiswe rive available kumadzimai edu. Madzimai edu obika negas zvoreruka, madzimai edu obika nebiogas zvoreruka. Toita inonzi rural electrification pachirungu, madzimai edu obetserekawo nokushandisa magetsi kumusha. Ndo basa redu isu semaparamende ndo zviri kudiwa nemadzimai aya. Madam Speaker, matu wechigaro chine nyaya madzimai anoenda kumabasa vari panguva yekuyamwisa iyai, tiri kuti sitari taona kuti aiwazve kune unpaid care work yakakura apa. Ngatisivabetsera madzimai akuvaisira mababysiters kumabasa, ngativapewo ma-breastfeeding times kumabasa. Ndo zviri kudiwa nemadzimai kuti burden iyaya yeunpaid care work idzikisirwe ite zviri nani. Madam Chair, tine vana vasikana vanoenda kuchikoro, Madam Chair, ende vachenjeri kana kuti vakaita tsvakurudzo vanoti ivo mwanasikana wega wega anoenda kuperiod mazuva anokwana 3 kana 4 pamwedzi woga woga. So tikuti mwana uyu mwanasikana uyu watova neburden yaanayo over and above unpaid care work. So tikuti isusu hurumende isu titaona kuti hadiscover problem kuti vane unpaid care work, ngatisivabetsera vanasikana ava kuti vawanewo sanitary wear. Hurumende inobhadheta kusanitary wear every year, but mari inozonobuda kuinda kusanitary wear imari shomana nezvikuru. Saka tiri kuti kudii isu semaparlamentarians semasevatungamiri vevanhu taona kuti there is unpaid care work apa inonyanya kuafecta madzimai nevanasikana. Tadi kuita push nyaya yekuti nyaya yemasanitary pads mari yemasanitary pads ibude kuti ministry yeeducation ive nemasanitary pads kuzvikoro zvose, vanasikana vedu varege kukanganisiwawo kurega pachikoro nyaya yekushaya masanitary pads. Madam Chair, chimwe chakadava chinokosha Madam Chair kurejusa nyaya iyi ndechekuti isu varume ngatinzwisisei nyaya iyi kuti yakakosha, so that isu varume toita machampion enyaya iyi. Tikaita machampion enyaya iyi, nyaya inoreruka Madam Chair. So tikukumbira kuti varume vazhinji vapedzisa tibetsere madzimai edu kuita championing yedu vanhu vanzwise kuti no unpaid care work iyi zvatiri kudai sevatungamiri hakusi kubhadhara. Nyaya iripo ndekuti ngatibetseranei kurejusa kana kurerusa mutoro nemadzimai edu. Namashoko mashoma natenda Madam Chair.
Thank you. Further debates, I call upon Honorable Mtokonyi.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I also rise to debate on the motion. I think from the prayer of the motion, it also seeks the issue of policy intervention. But it's also clear that from a policy perspective, the government is doing much and has done. If you look at our constitution, section 17 and 18, it also addresses, recognize the aspects regarding to this care work. Again, the National Gender Policy 2013 to 2030, it also seeks again to address, to reduce the issues regarding to this care work. And also, Madam Speaker, the SDG 5, again, the Sustainable Development Goal 5, it also seeks to address that. So, from the intervention perspective, the policies are there, and I think what we need to continuously do through the framework, the 3R framework, which says we have to first recognize, like what Honorable Mazwanyika has alluded, we accept, we need to recognize the great work that is being done by our girls in the communities, the women in the communities. So the recognition is there, and again, the statistics says it that over 70% of their time is spent doing these care works, you know, all the aspects, looking after the children, all these other things. So that is quite a lot of time in terms of time use. Zimstats again, in terms of its time use survey, it also alluded that quite a lot of time is spent by these care workers doing this course, and also including, if you look in the health, a lot of you know, we've got the home-based care programs. A lot of women and girls, they are the ones whom we see taking care of our elderly, taking care of the sick, and as such, this is quite a great job that we have to recognize as a nation and also as parliamentarians, so that we can also come up with more of sustainable ways of reducing the man hours in terms of working hours, and of which the government is actually in the process and in the motion of alleviating these challenges by drilling boreholes. We've seen again the programs of the rural electrification programs. The whole idea is try to make our care workers minimize the operational or working time, so that they also then don't get more hours of doing these core works. Madam Speaker, again, you can see that these care works, particularly in other countries in Europe, this is a big business of caregiving. And as such, that kind of recognition again is also very important to also be recognized this in this country. But what is important and what the government has done now, it is doing quite a lot. Like I alluded, we have seen in the statistics, a lot of clinics are being built, and this also then reduces the the man hours in terms of working hours of our girls, our caregivers. Again, all these village business units that we see, it's also programs to reduce, to redistribute in terms of the operating hours. But Madam Speaker, I actually do support that, yes, there has to be recognition in these care givers, care workers, and indeed the government is recognizing, and much more can still be done for a better Zimbabwe. I so submit, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Further debate. I call upon Honorable Moyo Priscilla.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank you for the opportunity to debate the motion tabled by Honorable Sibanda on the need to recognize unpaid care and domestic work. The concept of care is not only performed in hospitals and clinics. Every day, millions of Zimbabwean families provide unpaid care for sick relatives, older persons, persons with disabilities, and those living with chronic illnesses. Without this invisible workforce, our public health system would simply be overwhelmed. Yet, these caregivers often receive no training, no financial support, and no recognition, despite saving government millions of dollars in institutional care costs. Madam Speaker, when caregivers become exhausted, households experience poor health outcomes, preventable illnesses increase, and demand for expensive hospital care rises. The absence of structured support therefore shifts greater costs onto the national health system. I believe that the introduction of a national care policy and legislation would integrate care into Zimbabwe's health planning by providing caregiver training, relief services, home-based care support, and stronger community health programs. Such interventions reduce unnecessary hospital admissions, improve recovery rates, and enable families to care safely for valuable members within their communities. Honorable Speaker, Madam, Japan provides an instructive example. Faced with one of the world's oldest population, Japan introduced a long-term care insurance system that provides publicly funded home and community care services while supporting family caregivers. The result has been a reduced pressure on hospitals, improved quality of life for older persons, and a more sustainable health system. For Zimbabwe, investing in care is therefore not simply social protection, it is preventive health care. Every dollar invested in supporting caregivers reduces future health care costs while building a healthier and more resilient nation. Honorable Speaker, Madam, a stronger care economy is stronger health system. I thank you.
Thank you. Further debate. I call upon Honorable Osibanda.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker. I would like to take this opportunity today
to thank all honorable members who added value to the motion that I tabled before the August House. Suffice to say, this motion is very critical in recognizing and upholding the dignity of our unpaid care workers in the country. It is my fervent hope that the recommendations and solutions that you provide will go a long way towards inspiring our unpaid care workers and preserving their unfettered commitment. Towards the betterment of humankind, I therefore embrace this moment to move that this emotional charged motion be unreservedly adopted by this House. I thank you.
Thank you. I put the question that the motion be adopted. Those who have that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the motion is adopted. I recognize the Deputy Chief Whip.
Good afternoon, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Afternoon.
Madam Speaker, I move that we revert back to order number 44 on our today's order.
Who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
Is there an objection? No objection. Agreed to. The clerk will read the 44th order of the day.
Agenda debate on motion on the report of the Joint Portfolio Committees on Budget, Finance and Investment Promotion and Public Accounts on the benchmark visit to Nigeria.
When this debate was adjourned on 12th May 2026, the question before the House was a motion by Honorable Liwayo that this House takes note of the report of the Joint Portfolio Committee on Budget, Finance and Economic and Investment Promotion and Public Accounts on the benchmark visit to Nigeria held from 31st August to 6 September 2025. Is there any further debate? I call upon Honorable Patricia Lutz.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to debate the Nigerian benchmark report presented by Honorable Chairperson Liwayo. I was fortunate to be part of the delegation to this benchmarking. We have indeed learned a lot, as indicated in the report. Along the way, we observed certain areas that clearly require improvement, while at the same time, we also noted that others where our practices are already well aligned. What triggered my nerves, Madam Speaker, ma'am, was the fact that in Nigeria, the unallocated reserve budget does not exceed 5% of the national budget. We all understand that the national budget is the most important instrument of fiscal policy, and as Parliament, when we do our debates every year, we must ensure that allocations reflect national priorities and citizen needs. In countries such as Nigeria, the contingent budget is kept at 5% of the national budget. We observed that this benchmark ensures that contingent funds serve their purpose, that is to address unforeseen emergencies without becoming a parallel budget controlled solely by Treasury. My humble submission, Honorable Madam Speaker, ma'am, is that as Zimbabwe we should adopt this best practice to strengthen fiscal discipline and align with the religion norms. Over the years, Madam Speaker, ma'am, we have come to learn that at large unallocated reserve have the following undesirable consequences. We have seen that the large unallocated treasury effective transfers allocation authority from Parliament to Treasury. You can note that Parliament constitutional power of the pursuer is diluted when instead say up to 10% of funds are left unallocated. Secondly, Treasurer may direct funds without parliamentarian scrutiny, create opportunities for inefficient allocation. This, Honorable Madam Speaker, ma'am, creates opportunities precisely because treasurer are the ones who manage the reserve and can use it in whatever way they deem fit without necessary checks and balance. In such circumstances, resources risk being diverted to areas that may not reflect national priorities, thereby weakening the integrity of our budget process. It is therefore important that the Minister seeks authority to spend the allocated funds. Thirdly, Madam Speaker, ma'am, this touches directly one of our main constitutional functions, which is oversight. Parliament will not be able to track spending priorities if large sums remain allocated. Therefore, I support the submission of 5% cap of the allocated reserve as follows: to strengthen Parliament oversight so that 95% of the budget is allocated through parliamentary debate and approval. Madam Speaker, ma'am, we all understand that the public debt in Zimbabwe is growing and this calls for sharper scrutiny. Now, one key observation is that when debt reports are presented in Parliament during the budget presentation, our collective attention immediately shifts to the budget statement itself, and only few members give serious focus to debt. As a result, debt analysis is left at risk and the true picture of debt is, therefore, if you want proper scrutiny of debt trends, if you may want to understand how obligations have built up and how they affect our fiscal space, then we must act. That is why I strongly support recommendation to establish a debt oversight subcommittee, one that specifically deals with debt issues, so that Parliament can exercise its constitutional role more effectively and safeguard the nation from unsustainable borrowing. Lastly, Madam Speaker, ma'am, we all know that the vision of this country is often reflected in the status of its embassies abroad. Indeed, a beautiful, well-designed embassy is far more than just a functional workspace. It stands as a powerful instrument to foreign policy, cultural diplomacy, and national identity. In other words, it is physically manifesting of a nation's values, pride, of a nation values, expression on foreign soils. As we dream of Vision 2030 here at home, our embassy should reflect this trust. I want to commend the Second Republic for the ongoing work on construction of Zimbabwean embassy in Abuja. It's a massive structure that tells a story of who we are in Africa. I so submit.
Thank you. Further debate. I call upon Honorable Chilua.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. I rise to add my voice in support of the motion by Honorable Lingon Ndluwayo, which was seconded by Honorable Madziwa Nyika. And the report that we are debating is the joint report of the Committees on Budget and Finance and Investment Promotion and that of Public Accounts. So we had a benchmark visit to Nigeria National Assembly, which took place from the 31st of August to the 6th of September 2025. So I was privileged to be a member of the delegation that undertook this very important visit, and it was funded by the Africa Development Bank
Allow me, Madam Speaker, to share with this august House the profound lessons that I personally drew from the visit and why I fully support the motion by the Honorable Chair of the Committee as contained in his Chairman's report. I will start with the lessons that I drew from the fiscal oversight committees that we saw are existing in Nigeria. Madam Speaker, ma'am, one of the most striking observations that I made during our visit to the Nigeria National Assembly was the elaborate and specialized committee architecture that Nigeria has put in place to exercise legislative oversight over public finances. Madam Speaker, for us Zimbabwe as a country, Chapter 17 of the Constitution of Zimbabwe establishes the legal foundations of public finances, assigning Parliament explicit authority to oversee state revenues, approve national budgets, monitor public debt, and hold the executive branch to account. Specifically, Section 298, it mandates transparency, fair burden sharing in taxation, equitable revenue sharing across tiers of government, and the responsible public spending. I also want again to draw your attention to Section 299, which empowers Parliament to monitor and supervise state revenue and spending across all levels of government, including statutory bodies, commissions, local authorities, to ensure proper accounting and legal compliance. So these are the specific sections within our constitution where Parliament draws its oversight powers. So in Nigeria, they have got dedicated and distinct committees covering appropriations, finance, aids and loans, debt management, banking and currency, as well as national planning and economic affairs. Each of these committees focus exclusively on its designated area, which then brings depth, expertise and rigor to the oversight function. I was humbled to learn, Madam Speaker, that in Zimbabwe, our Budget, Finance and Investment Promotion Committee is expected to cover all that work that 4 separate Nigerian committees handle. This is not a criticism of our hard-working members, but rather a reflection on the need to reconsider and strengthen our committee architecture so that we can discharge our oversight mandate with the thoroughness that the people of Zimbabwe deserve. The lesson here is clear. Specialization breeds effectiveness, and our Parliament must seriously consider restructuring its committee system to achieve focused and meaningful oversight. The other issue that we also covered during the benchmark visit was on the budget process and the importance of budget retreats. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I want to draw your attention to Section 305 of the Constitution, which is on appropriations. Section 305 requires the minister responsible for finance to present the national budget and estimates of the revenue and expenditure to the National Assembly for each financial year. No man can be withdrawn from the Consolidated Revenue Funds unless authorized by an appropriation act. These are the provisions as provided for in Section 305 of our national constitution. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I was particularly impressed by the manner in which Nigeria, the Appropriations Committee, approaches the budget process after the federal president presents the national budget. So in their case, the budget is presented by the president. Rather than conducting a superficial review, the committee goes on a dedicated retreat where members conduct an in-depth, line-by-line analysis of budget allocations at the vote, program, and sub-program levels. This disciplined and structured approach ensures that no allocation escapes scrutiny. and that members can meaningfully interrogate the assumptions underpinning the budget. Furthermore, I noted with interest that Nigerian legislators review the previous year's actual performance before approving the following year's budget, thereby ensuring continuity, accountability in program implementation. This practice, Madam Speaker, is one that Zimbabwe must urgently adopt. A budget retreat of this nature would transform our budget approval process from a largely ceremonial exercise into a substantive and evidence-based legislative function. I therefore strongly support the recommendation in this report that Zimbabwe should consider a budget retreat where a thorough review of budget allocations is done at VOT, program, and sub-program levels for each ministry, department, and agency. The other issue that also caught my attention when I was in Nigeria was on the role of the Legislative Budget Office, which is our budget office. Madam Speaker, the critical lesson I drew from this visit relates to the role of the Directorate of Legislative Budget and Planning in the Nigerian National Assembly, which is the equivalent of our Parliament Budget Office. This directorate provides independent, impartial, and evidence-based analysis to support legislative decision-making on national development plans, the medium-term framework, macroeconomic framework, and the medium-term expenditure framework, the fiscal strategy paper, and annual appropriations. What struck me most, Madam Speaker, was that this analysis does not solely rely on information provided by the federal government, but is also informed by verified data from civil society organizations, the National Bureau of Statistics, and other recognized institutions. This independence is critical because it means that legislators are not entirely dependent on the executive for information, thereby strengthening the principle of separation of powers. Zimbabwe's Parliament Budget Office must be similarly empowered, adequately resourced, and given the institutional independence necessary to provide credible and independent fiscal analysis to our committees. Then on the issue of the unallocated reserve budget, it's an issue that has been already discussed by Honorable Ndudzo. But Madam Speaker, I would also want to touch on it and drew the attention of the House to the matter that I also found we can draw parallels as Zimbabwe. So as has already been mentioned by Honorable Ndudzo, in Nigeria, this vote, which is referred to as the service-wide vote, is kept at a maximum of 5% of the total budget. Any ministry, department, or agency that wishes to access these funds must formally apply to the office of the President, justifying the emergency circumstances that necessitate such an access. At the end of the financial year, a comprehensive utilization report is submitted to Parliament for consideration. This is a system of checks and balances that ensures the unallocated reserve is not abused. In Zimbabwe, Madam Speaker, the situation is starkly different. There is currently no statutory limit on the proportion of the budget that can remain unallocated. And the Minister of Finance, Economic Development and Investment Promotion is authorized to spend these funds through the Appropriation Act without the requirement to seek specific Parliament authority for each expenditure. This is a gap that creates significant risk of fiscal indiscipline and lack of accountability. I therefore strongly support the recommendation that Zimbabwe should introduce regulations to cap the unallocated reserve at below 5% of the total budget and require the ministers to seek authority before spending these funds. This reform is not about restricting the executive, but about ensuring that Parliament fulfills its constitutional role as the guardian of public resources. Madam Speaker, ma'am, we also learned a lot on the debt management oversight function. Referring to the Constitution of Zimbabwe, Section 327, which deals with international treaties and agreements, dictates that international financial agreements and loan conventions involving fiscal obligations are processed or subjected to parliamentary oversight. I draw you again to Section 298, which is on principles of public finance management, which mandates that public borrowing and all transactions involving national debt must be carried out transparently and in the best economic interest of Zimbabwe. Madam Speaker, the lessons on debt management oversight were perhaps the most sobering of all that I encountered during this visit. Nigeria has established dedicated committees in both the Senate and the House of Representatives, specifically the Senate Committee on Local and Foreign Debts and the House Committee on Aid, Loans and Debt Management, to provide oversight over the entire debt cycle, from pre-borrowing assessment, approval, execution, to post-borrowing monitoring. Every borrowing, whether at the federal or state level, must be approved by Parliament. When the President wishes to borrow, he writes formally to Parliament, details the terms, conditions, purpose, repayment plan, and economic justification. The committees then hold public hearings, assess debt sustainability, and submit reports with recommendations before the full House votes on approval. This is a robust system that ensures that no public debt is contracted without legislative scrutiny and approval. In Zimbabwe, Madam Speaker, the Minister presents a borrowing plan to the National Assembly as part of the budget presentation, and once that plan is approved, individual loan agreements can be contracted without returning to Parliament for specific approval, although ratification is required after the fact. This is a fundamental weakness in our debt governance framework. Given Zimbabwe's current debt situation, Madam Speaker, I believe it is imperative that we establish the dedicated debt oversight subcommittee that specifically deals with the debt issues as recommended in the Chairman's report. Such a committee would ensure that Zimbabwe's borrowing is transparent, sustainable, and aligned with the national economic agenda. We also had a tour of what is referred to as the National Institute for Legislative and Democratic Studies. Madam Speaker, I cannot conclude my contribution without mentioning the National Institute of Legislative and Democratic Studies, known as NIUDZ, which serves as the in-house think tank and research hub of the Nigeria National Assembly. NIUDZ provides technical expertise, capacity development, research, documentation, and policy advice to both chambers of the National Assembly as well as state legislatures. It runs training and induction programs for legislators and parliament staff, and it conducts policy and budget analysis, supporting bill drafting, legislative research, and produces tools such as the Legislative Oversight Manual that provide structured methodologies for committee inquiries. The partnership between NIUDZ and the Nigerian Parliament is truly symbolic. Madam Speaker, the legislature, the NIUDZ provides the legislature with the legitimacy and a clear mandate, while NIUDZ strengthens parliamentary authority by equipping committees with evidence, tools, and training required to scrutinize borrowing, to manage oversight of debt service, and hold the executive to account. Zimbabwe must seriously explore the possibility of establishing a similar institution or significantly strengthening our existing research and library services to provide our legislators with the technical support they need to be effective. As I conclude, we also had an interaction where we discussed the issue of Parliament receiving what is called the first line of charge. Madam Speaker, I was struck to learn that in Nigeria, The federal parliament's budget, and I think I would want the honorable members to listen carefully to this one. The federal parliament's budget is treated as the first line charge of the national budget. This means that parliament's funding is secured before any other allocation is made. Yes, we have got all the votes, from vote 1 up to the last vote, but what gets the first vote is parliament. This ensures that the legislator is adequately resourced to carry out its oversight functions without being financially dependent on or subject to the goodwill of the executive. In Zimbabwe, our parliament is not similarly protected, and this creates a situation where the very institution that is supposed to hold the executive accountable is itself financially constrained and potentially vulnerable to executive influence. I strongly support the recommendation that the parliament's budget should be the first line of charge of Zimbabwe's national budget. An underfunded parliament is an ineffective parliament, and an ineffective parliament is a disservice to the citizens of Zimbabwe when it comes to its oversight function. Let me conclude, Madam Speaker, by saying the benchmark visit to Nigerian National Assembly was an eye-opening and enriching experience that has deepened my appreciation of the critical role of a well-resourced, well-structured, and empowered parliament. How such a parliament plays a role in ensuring fiscal governance and accountability. The lessons we have learned from Nigeria are not theoretical. They are practical, implementable, and urgently needed in Zimbabwe. I call upon this House to adopt the recommendations as contained in the Chairman's report in its entirety and urge the relevant authorities to make immediate steps to implement these reforms. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you for the debate. I call upon Honorable Hliwayo.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity to wind up the debate, to wind up the motion in question. Honorable Speaker, ma'am, allow me to express my effusive thanks to all the honorable members who have emotionally debated the motion in question. Yes, starting from Honorable Madziwanyika, who seconded the debate, Honorable Pinduzo and Honorable Chilua, who all supported the recommendation of the report in question. They all echoed that the benchmark visit provided the joint committee with valuable insights into Nigeria's budget process and the role of public accounts, in the post-audit oversight. The honorable members also highlighted the need to adequately budget for debt servicing to avoid a debt overhang. They also reflected on the need to improve unallocated reserve utilization transparency. And they also recommended that the Ministry, Treasury, must make more effort to reduce or lower the UR utilization, try to match the international peers who kept it at 5%, just as Honorable Chilua has alluded to. They all fully supported the motion. Having said this, Honorable Speaker, ma'am, I therefore move that this House do now adopt the report on benchmark visit by the Joint Portfolio Committee on Budget and Public Accounts. Thank you.
I put the question that the motion be adopted. Those who have that opinion say aye. Those of the contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the motion is adopted. I recognize Deputy Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that we revert back to order number 21 on today's order, please.
For seconds,
I second, Madam Speaker.
is there an objection? No objection, agreed to. Notice of motion number 21, Honorable P. Moyo.
I move the motion in my name.
Thank you. Seconds.
I second.
I call upon Honorable P. Moyo to move a motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to give a report of the OACP African Region Parliamentary Group meeting and the first Africa EU Parliamentary Assembly. Honorable Speaker, the meetings of the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States African Region Parliamentary Group and the first Africa EU Parliamentary Assembly were held in the Eswatini Valley, in the Ezulini Valley in Eswatini from the 6th to the 15th of May 2026. These meetings marked a historic milestone in implementing the parliamentary dimensions of the Samoa Agreement. It also marked a major shift from a donor-recipient model of OACP-EU relationship to a true partnership framework. By focusing on shared priorities, equal participation, and regional protocols designed for Africa, the Caribbean, and the Pacific. Over 3 days, Africa-EU delegates shared insights on mutually beneficial partnership in key priority areas, including peace and security in Africa, youth education and mobility, women in agricultural value chains, culture and creative industries in Africa-EU relations, critical minerals partnerships, and the future of multilateralism. These priorities are in line with the overall aim of the Samoa Agreement, which is to achieve the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals and the goals of the Paris Agreement on climate change. The delegation from Parliament of Zimbabwe comprised of the following: Honorable Lieutenant General retired M.R. Nyambuya, Deputy President of the Senate, and was the head of the delegation. Honorable P. Moyo, Member of Parliament. Honorable Mulochwa, Member of Parliament. Ms. R. Loka, Director, External Relations. Mr. M. Mugova, Principal Research Officer. And Mr. O. Muchenu, Security Aide to the Deputy President of the Senate. The OACP's Southern Africa Region Parliamentary Group meetings, chaired by our newly elected chairperson of the OACP's Southern Africa Regional Parliamentary Group, Lieutenant General retired R.M. Nyambuya. Delegates exchanged views and identified key priorities that the sub-region believed should guide Africa's common position under the Samoa Agreement. Delegates from Malawi, Lesotho, Namibia, Botswana, Eswatini, and Zimbabwe took the lead with support from others in calling for a united African voice on youth empowerment, poverty eradication, democracy, climate justice, rural development, governance, and resource mobilization. Delegates from Lesotho highlighted the importance of environmental protection and also expressed concern over the slow pace of ratification of the Samoa Agreement, while Botswana called for greater public awareness and support for the communities displaced by climate change. Furthermore, Zimbabwean delegates, together with the Namibian delegates, raised concerns about provisions related to sexual orientation contained in the Samoa Agreement, arguing for respect for African cultural values and national sovereignty. The Eswatini delegates proposed practical institutional reforms and received full support from other delegates. These reforms included performance-based budgeting, parliamentary oversight mechanisms, linking Samoa Agreement priorities to national parliamentary programs, and allocating 15% of the OACPS budget to youth initiatives. Madam Speaker, the Zimbabwean delegates strongly called for the promotion of local value addition and beneficiation of Africa's raw materials to ensure mutually beneficial trade, instead of continued dependence on exporting unprocessed resources. All delegates agreed on the need for reforms to establish independent OACPS funding mechanisms in order to reduce over-reliance on the European Union. Proposals made included member state contributions based on the formula that considers economic indicators as well as capped contribution threshold to ensure fairness and sustainability. Meetings of the Bureau of the OACPS Africa Regional Parliamentary Group. Prince Lindani of the Kingdom of Eswatini, who opened the meeting, repeated the urgent need for African countries to speak with one voice on industrialization, local value addition, and youth empowerment as key pillars of Africa's development strategy under the Samoa Agreement. Honorable Yaya Dumba Marias of the Republic of Cameroon, chairperson of the OACPS Central Africa Region Parliamentary Group, who chaired the meeting, highlighted the common continental priorities under the Samoa Agreement. These included peace and security, counter-terrorism, maritime security, socio-economic growth, infrastructure development, local value addition, beneficiation and industrialization, climate change response and financing, and independent OACPS funding. Delegates further agreed that the OACPS should establish election observer missions, and that the OACPS Africa Parliamentary Regional Group should strengthen cooperation with regional and continental parliamentary institutions such as the Pan-African Parliament. Furthermore, delegates unanimously agreed that reports from the OACPS meetings should be tabled before national parliaments within 90 days to strengthen accountability and implementation. Madam Speaker, during the brainstorming session, delegates identified possible OACPS reforms. These included aligning the OACPS structure with the Samoa Agreement, establishing standing committees instead of the ad hoc committees, and streamlining OACPS support staff into a lean and fit-for-purpose structure. Delegates also repeated the need for the OACPS to fund itself to engage heads of state and government to ensure that member contributions to the OACPS are paid. In addition, delegates agreed in principle that in order to further reduce dependence on the EU, the OACPS headquarters should be relocated to one of the OACPS member countries. Delegates agreed on the need to re-engage South Africa following its withdrawal from the OACPS. On another note, Global Gateway, through Mr. D. Rosai, head of the Strategic Partnership Unit with the OACPS, briefed delegates strategic flagship partnership projects in Africa. Delegates were informed that these projects include climate and energy, education and research, health, humanitarian assistance, digital technology, and foreign direct investment, FDI. Of the 8 billion euros allocated to the OACPS Africa, was reported to receive the largest share with 132 out of the 256 flagship projects. Despite the reported impact of the Global Gateway projects in Africa, delegates led by the Botswana delegation expressed concern that development assistance was increasing the OACP's dependence on the EU instead of promoting industrialization in rural African areas to reduce rural to urban migration. Delegates urgently called for Global Gateway projects to directly benefit ordinary citizens, especially women, at the community level. In addition, delegates called for the fair distribution of flagship projects among OACPS member states and stressed the need for parliamentary oversight of these projects to strengthen African ownership and control. Official opening of the sitting of the first session of the joint African and EU Parliamentary Assembly, officially opened by King Mswati III, represented by His Highness Prince Lindani. The occasion carried a clear message of Africa-EU partnership, hope, and Eswatini's growing role on the international stage. The speech had a strong forward-looking message presenting parliamentary diplomacy as an important tool in addressing current global challenges such as climate change, food insecurity, geopolitical tensions, and technological transformation. His Majesty also reaffirmed Eswatini's support for the Samoa Agreement, describing it as an important framework for advancing the role of parliamentary diplomacy during geopolitical tensions and for promoting trade, investment, food security, climate resilience, education, and digital transformation between the OACPS and the EU. During the same occasion, the Honorable Speaker of Parliament of the Kingdom of Eswatini, Mr. Mabuza, emphasized that the Samoa Agreement has introduced a more modern and balanced partnership, noting that parliamentarians now play a central role in shaping the evolving relationship. Adding a voice, Honorable Hilde Vutumas, co-chair of the Africa-EU Parliamentary Assembly and vice chair of the OACP-EU Joint Parliamentary Assembly in the European Parliament, stressed the need to turn dialogue into real political action. She emphasized that Africa and Europe must work together based on mutual respect, shared Samoa Agreement priorities, common interests, and shared responsibilities. The role of the regional organizations and their parliaments in peace and security in Africa. Honorable Speaker, Honorable Momento Ibrahima, Speaker of the Parliament of the Economic Committee of West African States, in the video addressed and praised the OSCPS-EU partnership as a strong international and regional framework. She said it allows parliamentarians to respond to geopolitical tensions, economic and security threats, extremism, terrorism, and to use early warning systems. She shared ECOWAS' experience in building effective parliamentary preventative diplomacy, inclusive governance, and a regional parliamentary system. Most importantly, she stressed the peace. She stressed that peace can only be achieved when youths, women, and minority groups are fully included. Delegates from Kenya supported the delegates from Sierra Leone, identified root causes of conflicts as foreign aggression, scramble for resources, unemployment, especially of youths who are vulnerable to radicalization. Following remarks by the Malawi delegates who underlined the role of regional parliaments in implementing the Samoa Agreement to boost trade, reduce inequality, and fight poverty, delegates from Angola, Eswatini, and Central Africa highlighted the close link between peace, security, and development, especially through multilateral cooperation. They also pointed to the African Union Peace Fund as a key tool for financing peace and security efforts, noting that both Africa and Europe continue to face conflicts. The delegates urged regional organizations to invest more resources, involve civil society, build trust between governments and citizens, and strengthen the role of the regional partnership in protecting human rights and promoting the rule of law. In its contribution, Rwanda referred to the Pan-African Parliament and the East African Legislative Assembly as commitment to ending conflicts through dialogue, while warning against regional inaction as seen during the 1994 genocide. Rwanda explained that, guided by history, it is now committed to peaceful conflict resolution, including its recent deployment in Cabo Delgado in Mozambique. Eswatini added that instability is one country. Let me take that again. Eswatini added that instability in one country affects its neighbors, and therefore regional parliamentary oversight was crucial in helping secure peace, as what happened in Mozambique. The Zimbabwean delegates reminded the meeting that regional organizations and parliaments face serious challenges in resolving conflicts. These include limited resources, poor coordination, and the ongoing tensions between national sovereignty and collective responsibility. Such difficulties highlight the need to strengthen cooperation, invest in regional systems, and show the political will to act firmly. Madam Speaker, the Zimbabwean delegates also emphasized a key lesson learned over the years. Governments, regional organizations, and parliaments must work together. Governments provide structure, parliaments give legitimacy, and together they can deliver lasting solutions. In their contributions, the European Union delegates noted that peace and stability can no longer be taken for granted in Europe, as shown by the Russia-Ukraine conflict. They raised concerns about misinformation and stressed the need for parliaments to defend international law, the rule of law, and human rights. The European Union delegates also recognized colonial legacy as contributory to conflicts in Africa, and hence parliaments from both Africa and European Union should address these challenges together. They also pointed out that Africa continues to face long conflicts, such as in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where fighting has lasted about 30 years, causing an estimated 10 million deaths, 7 million displaced people, and widespread sexual violence. Furthermore, European Union noted that in Sudan, civilians suffer from conflict, illicit financial networks, foreign interference, and illegal mining. The delegates emphasized that Africa and EU parliamentarians must learn from each other and work together. They stressed the importance of representing youth, women, minority groups, while jointly addressing democratic backsliding, since the two continents are closely connected. The EU delegates also agreed with their African counterparts that strong governance institutions, especially parliaments, are essential for peace, which is built not only through force but also through cooperation. They further agreed that Africa's territorial integrity and sovereignty must be respected, alongside greater financial support for Africa-led conflict prevention initiatives. Youth education and mobility. The Youth Forum preceded the dialogue and debate on youth education and mobility by African EU delegates, bringing together representatives from different sectors, including parliamentarians, youth, students, beneficiaries of education exchange programs such as the Erasmus, women's politicians and international organizations, such as the International Organization for Migration, AU Migration, and the Southern Africa Youth Forum, among others. Delegates fully agreed that Africa has the world's youngest population, while Europe has an aging population, creating opportunities for mutually beneficial partnerships. Delegates agreed that youth inclusion is a political necessity, especially since more than 70% of the sub-Saharan African population is under the age of 30, representing a significant demographic dividend with potential for economic transformation. Additionally, delegates observed that IOM data revealed that by 2022, there were approximately 300 million migrants globally, with 3 out of 10 migrants being under the age of 30. Noting that unemployment and search for better economic opportunities as major drivers of migration. Given the statistics, delegates were in agreement that the success of the Samoa Agreement largely depends on young people, as it will help address challenges facing African youth, such as unemployment, radicalization, trafficking, and limited opportunities. Even as youth migrate, delegates realized that realized that they face further challenges relating to the fact that many young migrants possess qualifications and skills that do not match labor market demands, as in the European Union, resulting in underemployment, and youth will not realize the dreams of their career. Madam Speaker, on that note, Eswatini delegates shared their holistic youth program focused on education for employability, led by institutions such as the Eswatini University of Technology, which also promotes safe and orderly youth mobility. Similar experiences were also shared by other delegates, including Zimbabwean delegates, who highlighted the Zimbabwe Open University's active participation in the Erasmus programs, which offers skills training in green technology. Let me, Madam Speaker, regarding challenges affecting youth, delegates noted that opportunities for education and mobility remain inaccessible to many youths from remote rural communities in Africa. Costly visas, limited legal migration routes, forcing many young people to use unsafe and irregular migration pathways. Delegates observed that youth education and mobility, even in Africa, are shaped by a mix of structural barriers and emerging opportunities. Poverty, gender inequality, conflict, and weak infrastructure limit access, while regional integration policies and cross-border programs are increasingly enabling inter-African student movement. The European Union parliamentarians, on the other hand, emphasized that youth mobility should be properly regulated and managed in order to reduce irregular migration and the abuse of student mobility pathways. Furthermore, EU delegates called for balanced exchange programs that promote brain circulation instead of brain drain. They also encourage EU countries as partners of Africa to listen more carefully and respond more effectively to the concerns of African students. In unison, delegates urge African and European countries to ease visa conditions, support university exchange programs, promote the free movement of youth, goods and services within Africa and between Africa and the EU, and support safe and orderly migration. Madam Speaker, Women Forum, European women, empowering women in agriculture value chains as a driver of economic development. I'm sorry, this is a very important report, therefore I urge all of us to listen carefully. All delegates reached consensus that across Africa, women's access to land, funding, markets, and opportunities in the agro-value chain systems continue to be constrained by gender gaps. Therefore, they unanimously called for greater investment in women's training in entrepreneurship, with particular emphasis on young women and persons with disabilities. Honorable Speaker, Mrs. Elle Phillips, Director of Partnerships and UN Collaboration at the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, in a video address, highlighted that women and girls are the backbone of agricultural productivity, sustaining food security and livelihoods. She noted that their contributions within agro-value chains remain heavily undervalued, despite women consisting 21% of the agricultural labor force in Europe, 76% in Africa, and 40% globally. She emphasized the urgent need to improve women's access to labor, land, and decision-making, and to strengthen their involvement in agricultural value chains, a responsibility she stressed parliamentarians can fulfill through their legislative and representative roles. Honorable M. Changwa, Minister of Women Affairs, Community and Small and Medium Enterprises Development, praised the Samoa Agreement as a renewed partnership between Africa and the EU, stressing that the success depends on agro-systems built on equal participation and full recognition of women's contributions. She reminded delegates that women smallholder farms remain excluded from regional and international markets, and lamented that middlemen in agro-value chains continue to exploit women producers. She urged parliamentarians to address this challenge in the spirit of leaving no one behind. Delegates from Eswatini reported that smallholder women farmers face limited mechanization, lack of skills, and climate vulnerabilities. They outlined the program designed to transition women agri-producers into large-scale commercial farmers through strengthened policy and legislative framework, joint title deed registration, and access to concessionary loans. Senegal's delegation reiterated the need for improved access to loans, digital technology, and training, while Rwanda shared a progress that women in land ownership now stands at 94%, alongside expanded access to loans and subsidies. The position that M23 rebel group should be explicitly named in the text, given the should be named in the text, given the significant role in destabilizing the DRC and the wider Greater Lakes region. Rwanda strongly opposed singling out M23, stressing that the conflict involves multiple armed groups, and focusing on M23 was unfair. The DRC, however, insisted that the M23's role must be acknowledged directly, reflecting the deep rift between the two neighboring countries. The third disagreement resolved around UN Security Council reform. Africa called on the EU to support its long-standing demand for a permanent seat with vote powers, arguing that global governance must reflect Africa's demographic and geopolitical weight. The EU countered that Africa should also support its own bid for the permanent seat. African delegates rejected this as unfair, double-dipping, pointing out that EU member states such as France already hold permanent seats, granting the EU another seat. They argued would reinforce imbalance rather than correct it. Madam Speaker, The final area of dispute was the Russia-Ukraine conflict. The EU pressed for language explicit condemning Russia as the aggressor, and expressed concern about reports of African nationals being recruited under false pretenses to fight in the war. African countries resisted being drawn into what they saw as a Cold War style confrontation. They agreed that the EU and the allies, including the USA, have themselves violated human rights and international law in places such as Libya, Venezuela, Iran, Iraq, and Palestine, causing displacement suffering. Africa, instead of its right to waive this problem, maintaining neutrality and protecting its diplomatic independence. After protracted dialogue and debate that strayed into the following afternoon, with delegates breaking into small caucus groups to seek compromise, agreement was eventually reached. On the Russia-Ukraine conflict, African delegates expressed solidarity with displaced people, particularly women, children, and persons with disability, and emphasized their support for a peaceful resolution through dialogue and negotiations in line with UN principles and international law. In the same text, EU delegates aligned themselves with strong wording condemning Russian aggression against Ukraine. On the sensitive issue of LGBTQI rights, African countries secured language guaranteeing them the right to waive this provision, a safeguard also provided for in the Samoa Agreement. This debate balance allowed both sides to preserve their positions while moving forward with a unified set of recommendations. Taken together, these divisions underscore the fault lines in Africa-EU relations. At the same time, they highlight Africa's determination to assert sovereignty and resist extend pressure while the EU countries to assert sovereignty and resist external pressure while the EU countries to push for universal principles and alignment with the geopolitical stance. The Eswatini meeting therefore revealed the ongoing challenge of transforming Africa-EU relations from a donor-recipient dynamic into a genuine partnership of equals. The closing ceremony, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, ma'am. During the closing session, Co-President of Africa-EU Parliamentary Assembly held Vitamin stressed that differences of opinion in negotiations should be seen as progress, noting that Africa and EU are beginning to understand one another better, even if discussions sometimes involve arguments or heated exchanges. In his closing statement, Prince Lindani, representing His Majesty King Mswati III, emphasized that the true measure of success of Africa-EU Joint Parliamentary Meeting would not be the words on paper, but the tangible impact of the resolution on ordinary people's lives. He cautioned that resolutions must translate into action, reminding delegates that climate change, youth unemployment, and instability do not wait. On the recommendations, Madam, youth mobility and education. Expand equitable access. Parliamentarians should ensure that education and mobility programs reach rural and underprivileged youth, decentralizing initiatives like Erasmus, so that opportunities are not limited to urban or allied groups. Harmonize qualifications. That means align education standards, qualifications, and migration policies across Africa and the EU to make student and professional mobility smoother, while easing visa requirements for safe and legal movement. Invest in digital skills, like strengthen the youth's employability by funding education in digital skills, innovation and vocational training, ensuring young people are prepared for modern labor markets and entrepreneurship. Also promote safe migration by developing policies that expand legal migration pathways, encourage inter-Africa mobility, and support returning graduates and professionals to contribute to national and continental development. Support inclusive exchanges. That is, facilitate regional and international youth exchange opportunities, promote meaningful youth participation in governance, and build partnerships between Africa and the EU so that mobility strengthens sustainable development rather than draining skilled human capital. Women Forum. Empowering women in agriculture value chains as a driver of economic development. Strengthen land and resource rights. Parliament should pass laws which guarantee women's secure access to land through joint title deed registration, equitable inheritance laws, and supportive policy frameworks. Expand financial inclusion. Parliament should promote policy and legislative frameworks which increase women's access to concessionary laws, subsidies, and digital financial services. Promote women market access and fair trade. Africa and EU parliamentarians should collaborate and promote mechanisms to connect women farmers directly to regional and international markets, bypassing exploitative middlemen. Invest in skills and technology. Scale up training in entrepreneurship, digital literacy, and climate-smart agriculture, with a focus on young women and persons with disabilities. The role of regional parliaments, regional organizations, and their parliaments in peace and security in Africa. Strengthen preventive diplomacy. National parliaments should build systems for early warning dialogues and mediation to address tensions before they escalate into violence. Promote inclusive governance. Peace requires the active participation of youth, women, and minority groups. Parliaments must ensure inclusive representation and policies that reduce marginalization, unemployment, and vulnerability to radicalization. invest in peace financing. Both Africa and the EU parliaments should support mechanisms such as the African Union Peace Fund and allocate resources for conflict prevention, peace building and reconstruction while ensuring transparency and sustainability. Defend the rule of law. Parliaments must safeguard human rights, uphold international law, and counter misinformation while exercising strong oversight to prevent democratic backsliding and foster trust between governments and citizens. They must also foster regional cooperation by the African and the European Union parliaments should together work through regional assemblies, share lessons learned, and jointly address root causes of conflict such as resource competition, foreign interference, and illicit financial networks. Thank you for listening. This was a very long and very important report. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable P. Moyo. The question before the House is a motion by Honorable P. Moyo that this House takes note of the delegation report of OACPS, African Region, parliamentary groups, and its Africa EU Parliamentary Assembly held at Ezulwini Palazzo, Eswatini, 7th to 14th May 2026. Is there any debate? I now recognize Deputy Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that the debate do now adjourn.
Who seconds?
I second.
It has been moved that the debate be now adjourned. Is there any debate? I put the question that the debate be now adjourned. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the debate is adjourned. To what date, Chief Whip?
To the 1st of September. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that.
Just hold. I have an announcement. I wish to recognize the presence of members of parliament from the Kingdom of Eswatini, namely Honorable Tanele Magagula, the leader of the delegation, Honorable Tandeka Mavuso, and Honorable Lindiwe Mabuza, the clerk of the delegation. And the delegation has been invited by the Zimbabwe Youth Caucus to attend the Youth Model Parliament program, which will be conducted from Friday 21 August to Saturday 22 August 2026. You are most welcome, honorable members. May you please stand, honorable members, so that we can see you clearly. Thank you, honorable members. You are most welcome. I now recognize Deputy Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that we revert back to order number 20 on today's order paper.
Notice of motion number 20, Honorable Mawaneke.
Good evening, Madam Speaker, ma'am. I rise to move the motion in my name.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Mawaneke. Who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Thank you, Honorable Mawanganidze. I now call upon Honorable Mawaneke to move his motion.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The motion is to abolish the issuance of honorary doctorates by non-academic institutions and individuals. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I rise to present a motion that seeks to address an issue that is becoming increasingly concerning within our educational landscape, the issuance of honorary doctorates by non-academic institutions and individuals. Background of this situation, the practice of awarding honorary doctorates has traditionally been reserved for individuals of notable achievement, typically by accredited academic institutions. However, we have witnessed a proliferation of non-academic entities that issue such honors, often devoid of any legitimate scholarly evaluation. This trend has not only diluted the value of the title doctor, but has also led to significant confusion and concern within the academic community and the public. Madam Speaker, of concern is the erosion of academic integrity. The indiscriminate granting of honorary doctorates by non-academic entities undermines the credibility of genuine academic accomplishments. Exploitation and abuse. There are instances where these honors are issued in exchange for monetary compensation or other favors, creating an unethical environment that commodifies academic recognition. Public confusion. The existence of numerous individuals bearing honorary titles can mislead the public and diminish respect for legitimate academic credentials. And the impact on education system. This practice distracts from the value of actual scholarly work and the achievements which are essential for the growth and development of our educational system. My proposal, Madam Speaker, I propose that we take legislative action to abolish the issuance of honorary doctorates by non-academic institutions and by individuals. Also to establish clear regulations, thus formulating a framework that defines the criteria for awarding honorary titles and limiting it to accredited academic institutions only. 2, raising awareness, promoting understanding among the public regarding the distinctions between genuine academic degrees and honorary titles to mitigate confusion. And last but not least, enforcement of compliance, thus empowering relevant authorities to monitor and enforce compliance with this new standard, ensuring that any violations are met with appropriate penalties. Expected outcomes. Madam Speaker.
Order, honorable members. Order, honorable members. We can continue, honorable.
Thank you. I was on expected outcomes. Madam Speaker, restoring the integrity and value of the title doctor within education and professional sectors. Number 2, eliminating confusion and establishing clear distinctions between genuine academic qualifications and honorary awards. And lastly, upholding ethical standards in academic recognition and promoting a culture of meritocracy. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, I urge my fellow members of this honorable House to support this motion aimed at abolishing the issuance of honorary doctorates by non-academic institutions and individuals. By taking this step, we protect the integrity, the dignity of our academic titles and uphold the principles of excellence and integrity in our education system. I move that this motion be considered and referred to the relevant committee for further deliberations. So I submit.
Thank you, Honorable Maoneke. The question before the House is a motion by Honorable Maoneke, is set forth on page 2285 and 2286 of today's order paper. Is there any debate?
Yes, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Okay, you can continue, Honorable.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, ma'am. I rise to second the motion so ably moved by Honorable Maoneke on the urgent need to preserve the integrity, credibility, and value of honorary doctorates and other academic titles in Zimbabwe. Madam Speaker, ma'am, before addressing the substance of this motion, it is important to appreciate the history and purpose of honorary doctorates. The tradition dates back to the medieval universities of Europe, with one of the earliest recorded honorary doctorates being conferred by the University of Oxford in 1478. Since then, universities throughout the world have used honorary degrees or honoris calls are meaning for the sake of honor, to recognize individuals who have rendered exceptional service to humanity, advanced knowledge, demonstrated exemplary leadership, or made remarkable contributions to society. Unlike end doctoral degrees, honorary doctorates are not obtained through years of coursework, original research, examinations, or the defense of a doctoral thesis. Rather, they represent one of the highest distinctions that a university can bestow upon an individual whose life and work reflects the ideas of scholarship, excellence, and public service. Their prestige has always rested upon the integrity, selectivity, and academic credibility of the institutions that confer them. Madam Speaker, ma'am, for centuries, universities have guarded this privilege carefully because the authority to confer academic honors flows from academic autonomy, scholarly excellence, and recognized quality assurance systems. It is this long-standing tradition that distinguishes genuine honorary doctorates from awards issued outside recognized institutions of higher learning. The authority to confer such honors has never been an open privilege available to any organization or individual, but a responsibility exercised by accredited university in accordance with rigorous academic principles. The motion before the House is therefore both timely and necessary. It is not an attack on the practice of awarding honorary doctorates, for they remain an important means through which universities acknowledge exceptional contributions to society. Rather, it addresses the growing concern that organizations and individuals with neither academic standing nor legal authority are increasingly purporting to confer honorary doctorates. Such practices blur the distinction between genuine academic honors and unofficial recognitions, thereby weakening public confidence in legitimate institutions of higher learning. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the mover has comprehensively outlined the regulatory concerns surrounding this matter, hence I will not be repetitive. The Constitution of Zimbabwe recognizes education as a fundamental human right under Section 75, while Section 194 requires public institutions to be governed by the principles of professionalism, accountability, transparency, and integrity. These constitutional values are equally applicable to institutions of higher learning. Universities are custodians of knowledge, scholarship, and innovation. They are entrusted with producing the professionals, researchers, and leaders upon whom our country's future depends. Protecting the integrity of academic honors therefore contributes directly to strengthening constitutional governance and public confidence in our educational system. Madam Speaker, ma'am, Zimbabwe has over many decades built an inevitable reputation as one of Africa's leading centers of higher education. Our universities have produced distinguished judges, legal practitioners, medical practitioners, engineers, scientists, economists, and innovators whose contributions continue to be recognized across the region and beyond. Many students from neighboring countries have chosen Zimbabwe because of the quality and credibility of our higher education institutions. That reputation has been earned through decades of rigorous scholarship, quality assurance, and academic excellency. It is therefore a national asset that must be jealously guarded. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the Second Republic has placed education at the heart of the national transformation through heritage-based education 5.0, which emphasizes teaching, research, innovation, industrialization, and community service. This approach seeks innovation as Zimbabwe progresses towards the attainment of, This approach seeks to transform universities into engines of economic growth and innovation as Zimbabwe progresses toward the attainment of Vision 2030. Such an ambitious national agenda depends upon institutions whose qualifications and academic honors continue to enjoy unquestionable credibility credibility, both nationally and internationally. Safeguarding the integrity of honorary doctorates therefore supports the broader national objective of building a knowledge-driven economy founded on excellence, innovation, and integrity. Madam Speaker, ma'am, universities occupy a unique position in society because they derive their authority not from political power or commercial interests, but from intellectually credibility. Every qualification they award carries the reputation of the institution. Likewise, every honorary doctorate reflects the values, standards, and judgment of the university that confers it. When a university honors an individual, it is in effect affirming that the recipient embodies excellence, ethical leadership, and distinguished service worthy of emulation. Such decisions must therefore be approached with the highest standards of academic diligence, fairness, and integrity. Madam Speaker, ma'am, one of the defining characteristics of honorary doctorates is that they are intentionally rare. Their prestige lies not in the number awarded, but in the rigorous processes through which recipients are selected. Across the world, reputable universities subject nominations to careful scrutiny by academic committees, university senates, and governing council before any honorary degree is approved. Recipients are assessed against objective criteria including integrity, ethical leadership, and contribution to the knowledge, innovation, national development, and service to humanity. Transparency, accountability, and institutional oversight remain the hallmarks of internationally represented honorary degree programs. It is precisely this rigorous process that has preserved the global respect associated with honorary doctorates. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the recent experience of South Africa provides a useful lesson. Following concerns regarding inconsistent practices and misuse of honorary academic titles, the Council on the Higher Education developed a good practice guide on the award of honorary degrees and honorary professorships. The guide encourages universities to adopt transparent nomination procedures, clear eligibility criteria, ethical standards, consistent institutional policies, and public education on the proper use of honorary titles. It recognizes that the credibility of higher education depends not only on end qualifications, but also on the integrity of honorary academic awards. Zimbabwe can draw valuable lessons from such international good practice while developing a framework suited to our own legal and institutional context. Moreover, Madam Speaker, ma'am, this issue also concerns the future of genuine scholarship in Zimbabwe. Every year, thousands of Zimbabwean students dedicate years of hard work to postgraduate study. They spend countless hours conducting original research, publishing scholarly work, defending theses before panels of experts, and contributing to the advancement of knowledge. Their achievements represent discipline, perseverance, and intellectual excellence. Every honorary doctorate conferred outside recognized academic processes inadvertently diminishes the sacrifices of those who have earned doctoral qualification through rigorous scholarly endeavors. Parliament therefore has a duty to ensure that genuine academic achievements continues to receive the highest respect and recognition. At the same time, universities should continue to honor distinguished Zimbabweans whose contributions have transformed society. Outstanding scientists, innovators, educators, entrepreneurs, philanthropists, artists, athletes, and community leaders deserve national recognition where their achievements embody the ideals of higher education. However, such honors must also be conferred within a credible academic framework that preserves the prestige and public confidence. Madam Speaker, ma'am, the Zimbabwe Council of Higher Education, ZIMCHE, occupies a central position in safeguarding these standards. As the statutory body responsible for quality assurance in higher education, ZIMCHE has both the mandate and the institutional responsibility to promote consistency, integrity, and excellence across Zimbabwe's universities. Through clear national guidelines, robust quality assurance mechanisms, continuous monitoring and collaboration with accredited institutions, ZimCheck can ensure that honorary doctorates continue to reflect the highest standards of academic integrity while preserving the international standing of Zimbabwean higher education. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, ma'am, this motion is not about limiting recognition of distinguished citizens. It is about preserving the dignity of one of academia's highest honors. Honorary doctorates should remain rare, prestigious, and reserved for individuals whose contributions genuinely reflect excellence, integrity, and service to humanity. As Zimbabwe continues to strengthen its higher education sector under Heritage Base 5.0 and advances towards Vision 2030, we must ensure that academic honors remain worthy of the respect they have commanded for centuries. I therefore urge the Zimbabwean Council for Higher Education, working together with the Ministry of Higher Tertiary Education, Innovation, Science and Technology Development, and all accredited universities, to exercise rigorous oversight by developing clear national standards, promoting transparency and consistency in the conferment of honorary doctorates, strengthening quality assurance across institutions, and safeguarding the integrity and international reputation of Zimbabwe's academic honors for generations to come. With these remarks, Madam Speaker, ma'am, I so submit.
Thank you, Honorable. I now recognize Deputy Chief Whip.
Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that the debate do now adjourn.
Order, honorable members. It has been moved that the debate be now adjourned. Is there any debate?
Yes.
I put the question that the debate be now adjourned. Those of who are of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the debate is adjourned. To what date, Honorable Deputy Chief Whip?
To the 1st of September, Madam Speaker, ma'am. Madam Speaker, ma'am, I move that the House do not adjourn.
It has been moved that the House do not adjourn. Is there any debate? Who seconds? Sorry, who seconds?
I second, Madam Speaker.
It has been moved that the House do not adjourn. Is there any debate? I put the question that the House do now adjourn. Those who are of that opinion will say aye. Those of the contrary opinion will say no. I think the ayes have it, the ayes have it. The question is accordingly affirmed and the House is adjourned. To what date, Honorable Deputy Chief Whip?
To the 1st of September, Madam Speaker, ma'am.
Thank you, Deputy Chief Whip. The House is adjourned. Safe travels back home, honorable members.